we can't deal with minimalism without dealing with Donald Judd. Now, he's widely regarded as one of the most significant American artists of the post-war period. And he is perhaps the best known for his large-scale outdoor installations and long, spacious interiors, which he will design in Texas. His work has come to define what is referred to as minimalist art, a label that most of the artists at the time strongly objected to. His sculptures and installations, constructed out of industrial materials such as plexiglass, concrete, and steel, arranged in precise geometric shapes, were intended to emphasize the purity of the object themselves rather than any symbolic meaning they may have. And I quote, "The simple expression of complex thought." So he's trying to take complex ideas and boil them down into the simplest possible form. His particular interest in architecture led him to design both the sculptures and the spaces which they would be containing. And this would influence a generation of artists and designers, from people such as Anish Kapoor, who designs the Bean or the Cloud Gate, to David Batchelor today. So in terms of his work, Donald Judd's work, we need to look at Untitled. Now, unlike Stella, he doesn't give us a title. He intentionally names things untitled, and that's really common amongst the minimalists for the same reason that we see numbers frequently used by abstract expressionists. They don't want to give us a sense of interpretation. They want to remove any idea that the artist ever had anything to do with this. And as we saw with the Stella piece, as soon as there's a title, we read into it a whole nother level of interpretation. By removing the title, now it's entirely up to the viewer. So this is Untitled 1972. By the 1970s, Judd's specific objects, as he liked to call these box-like forms that would sit directly on the floor, had become, despite their sharp edges and flat color, more complex through his exploration of surface and color. So even though it looks like a simple box, there are a lot of choices that he makes. He decides to make it out of copper. He decides not to make it out of steel or plexiglass or wood. Just as one example. The exterior surface is composed of copper and industrial metal, but one whose warm and reflective surface, combined with the wooden floor that we tend to have in art galleries, tends to mirror its environment. It feels like it fits on that floor. The box's interior is colored with a highly saturated red enamel that vibrates in its intensity and contrasts with the static nature of the form in its entirety. So what he's done is you can kind of see the floor of the box, and the floor of the box is painted this really, really bright, vibrant red, and then it's reflected within the box because it's a reflective metal surface. The red interior also contrasts with the copper, and yet deepens the viewer's experience by encouraging them to think about the relationship between the inside and the outside, and by asking them to consider the effects of different surface values. Here, the sleekness of the red enamel adds to the seductive aspect of the piece and may suggest some of the objects, like nail polish or cars, that we choose to purchase as consumers. Here we see sort of a recreation of the box without as much reflection, so you get a better sense of what's going on there. Moreover, this piece is in some ways the polar opposite of the whole anthropomorphizing tendency that viewers tend to have when they look at sculpture. We tend for humans to extend the vertical orientation of their own body and see human forms in sculpture, which is traditionally vertical. So he's created something horizontal. We can't make it human. We can't assign it a personality, or it becomes more difficult because it doesn't remind us of our own vertical forms. Instead of seeing the work as a reflection of the usual vertical orientation of the human organic form, here we have a piece which is more horizontal and contains inside it empty space, without the insides. So what he's doing here is he's not creating a piece that's meant to be sold. He's creating a piece that's meant to start a conversation. What does it mean to be inside the box or outside the box? Does it matter? What sort of meanings do you assign to it? What about the red paint that we see so aptly reflected throughout? Does that change your view? Does it remind you of fire or passion or love? Does it remind you of something totally different? Is it just comforting? Is the copper comforting? There's a lot of questions and a lot of ideas that should dance through your mind as you look at something like this.